Maranatha, everyone. This is Pastor Jed, and this is another edition of my weekly video blog, Apologetics and Prophecy, where we like to take current events, put them through an apologetical and biblical lens to see just how close we are to the return of our Lord. This week, I want to focus on Revelation chapter 13. We're going to look at something out of verses 11 and 14 that deal with the false prophet, and one of the things that he needs to have in place before that time comes. And so in Revelation chapter 13, starting in verse 11, it says, John is speaking. He says, "Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. He had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence and causes the whole earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. He deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived." Now, this false prophet that will come on the scene will be the spokesman for the Antichrist, the one world leader that will come on the scene. This is post abomination of desolation, where the Antichrist has gone into the temple, declared himself to be God, announced to the world that he is God and to be worshipped as God. And this false prophet, this spokesman, will be able to go out and he will cause all those who are on the earth to worship the beast, and he will use signs and wonders and deceive those who dwell on the earth. For this to happen, the false prophet will have to have control of all the information that people receive. This is something that we have been pointing to for a long time. This is something that's been in the works for a long time. I know it's all over the news right now, but you need to understand, and we're going to look here in a moment, that the globalists have been working on this system for a very long time. That this is something that's been in the works for a long time, and the only thing that's really standing in their way is the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. You know, the Western's idea of freedom of speech. That needs to change. There needs to be something that gives, and the globalists understood this. They knew this. So they were just waiting for the right moment, for the right time to start to push the things needed. And they work in increments. They work in slow steps. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not like, President Joe Biden woke up yesterday and said, hey, we need a disinformation governance board. No, this is something that's been working on for a long time. And the one event that really kicked the thing into high gear was 9/11. That was, it's hard to believe that was almost 21 years ago that, some terrorists flew some planes into a building. It was a terrorist attack here on the United States soil. So they used the fear and the emotion of that to start several government entities that will set up what we're seeing coming into play right now, which is really going to ultimately lead to a global scale where the false prophet will have control, and the Antichrist, of all the information that people have access to. The first thing that we know that during 9/11 was the U.S. Patriot Act, commonly known as the Patriot Act. It was a landmark act of the United States Congress signed into law by President George W. Bush. The formal name of the statute is the Uniting and Strengthening America by Providing Appropriate Tools. Okay, remember we need to remember that. Tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. USA Patriot Act of 2001. And the commonly used short name is a contrived acronym that is embedded in the name set forth in the statute. The Patriot Act was enacted following the September 11th attacks, and it wasn't just the September 11th attacks, but remember right afterwards the 2001 anthrax attacks. There's a lot to be said about that, but we're short for time. But with this, it caused so much fear into people that we had to do something. We need a law. They always turn to the government, right? And so here we are with the stated goal of dramatically tightening U.S. national security, particularly as it related to foreign terrorism. In general, the act included three main provisions. So these are the three main positions that the Patriot Act gave the government special authority over. Extended surveillance abilities of law enforcement, including by tapping domestic and international phones. Now, we didn't have a problem with that back in 2016, now did we? Easier, and then of course that is the extended surveillance of tapping domestic and international phones. Easier interagency communication to allow federal agencies to more effectively use all available resources in counterterrorism efforts, and increased penalties for terrorism crimes and an expanded list of activities which would qualify for terrorism camp charges. The law is controversial due to its authoritarian of indefinite detention without trial of immigrants. Okay, what about the citizens in Washington, D.C. right now? Just something to think about. And due to the permission given to law enforcement to search property and records without a warrant, consent, or knowledge, though generally they need a warrant or consent to conduct the search. Since its passage, several legal challenges have been brought against the act, and federal courts have ruled that a number of provisions are unconstitutional. So the actual use of the tools they have discovered were unconstitutional in their use, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Here's what happened with the history of the bill. It contained many sunset provisions beginning in December 31st, 2005. Remember, it was only supposed to be temporary when George Bush sold it to Congress, sold it to us. It was only going to be temporary just to fight terrorism. But notice, it was supposed to die 4 years after its passage. Before the sunset date, an extension was passed for 4 more years, which kept most of the law intact. In May of 2011, now here comes President Barack Obama, he signed the Patriot Sunset Extensions Act of 2011, which extended 3 provisions. We just read them, right? These provisions were modified and extended until when? 2019 by the USA Freedom Act passed in 2015. So they keep pushing it. They keep pushing it. In 2020, and if you remember this happened during the last year of President Trump's office. It says efforts to extend the provision were not passed by the House of Representatives, and as such, the law has expired. The law may have expired, but not before creating the tools. They kept extending it because they created tools and government entities. Now you have to remember, when the government creates an entity, forget it. It's never going away. A good example, Obamacare. It's never going away. And so once the government creates something, they're not going to just let it go away. But we see the damage done by the Patriot Act already to our freedoms. And there was many people, many even Christians, that were saying, hey, you allow this thing to pass. We understand the terrorism, yes, but there needs to be more oversight on what freedom we gave them just because we made an emotional decision for our protection. But one of the other things that happened during this time with the Patriot Act, with 9/11, was the United States Department of Homeland Security is the U.S. Federal Executive Department. Notice it's federal executive, means it's run by the president, okay? In response to the September 11th attacks, with more than 240,000 employees. Maybe stop and think about that for a minute, how large this bureaucracy is that was created just because of 9/11. 240,000 employees. DHS is the 3rd largest cabinet department after the Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs. Let that sink in for a minute. Homeland Security policy is coordinated at the White House by the Homeland Security Council. Other agencies with significant Homeland Security responsibilities include the Departments of Health and Human Services, Justice, and Energy. In 2022, the DHS published a National Terrorism Advisory System built bulletin that labels those who spread misleading narratives about COVID-19 as a terrorist threat. The DHS also created the Disinformation Governance Board to focus on countering misinformation and disinformation. Let that sink in for a minute, and we'll come back to that in a minute. That's what everybody's talking about right now. But notice the history. Notice the incremental buildup. Notice the power given over to the executive branch that they were never by the Constitution allowed to have. But yet the globalists wanted that. They knew when they got their person in office, when they got their person who would see their way into office, that they could create this system to basically work around the First Amendment. And that's what they're doing. Now, another agency that's been around for a long time that now has gotten a lot is another agency that's run by the Department of Defense. It's called the National Security Agency. The NSA is a national level intelligence agency of the United States Department of Defense under the authority of the Director of National Intelligence. That is a position appointed by the president. He is the one who runs it. It's another executive branch. See how much power the president really has? The NSA is responsible for global monitoring, collection, and processing of information and data for foreign and domestic intelligence and counterintelligence purposes, specializing in a discipline known as signals intelligence. The NSA is also tasked with the protection of U.S. communications network and information systems. The NSA relies on a variety of measures to accomplish this mission, the majority of which are clandestine. Means you don't get to know about it. Top secret. The existence of the NSA was not even revealed until 1975. The NSA has roughly 32,000 employees. Now, that dwarfed in comparison to the DHS, but the two work together hand in hand. The massive extent of the NSA spying, both foreign and domestic, was revealed to the public in a series of detailed disclosures of international NSA documents beginning in June 2013. We have short memories. We forget what happened. Most of the disclosures were leaked by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, who is still sitting in jail, by the way, for exposing something that we should have known about a long time ago. It says on 4th of September 2020, the NSA surveillance program was ruled unlawful by the U.S. Court of Appeals. The court also added that U.S. intelligence leaders who publicly defended it were not telling the truth. But it's still in action. The NSA is still there. Its system is still in place. Remember, a government agency that has now been, they might say it's unlawful, but once the infrastructure, the tools, and the weapons that they've made are there, they're not going away. They're just getting ruled or regulated by somebody else. Now, that should not surprise us that we see these kind of things in the news. Like we know that the biggest social media platform that started was Twitter. And of course, we know Elon Musk just made a buyout of Twitter, and everybody's freaking out because he wants to make it more in line with freedom of speech. We know what Twitter's been doing. But notice that the people that are that are stepping up to the plate to cancel Elon Musk. It says, this article says that George Soros and Clinton Obama staffers and the European government have an anti-Musk campaign. This article's from the Daily Mail. It says, some of the most high-profile liberal figures have joined together to encourage advertisers to boycott Twitter if Elon Musk brings in his promised policy of unfettered free speech. 26 NGOs and advocacy groups signed a letter expressing concern about the world's richest man's plan. Musk himself responded to the letter asking who funded them. The answer being an assortment of dark money groups like George Soros, his Open Society Foundation, NGOs founded by former Clinton and Obama administration staffers, wealthy Democrat donors and their family foundations, labor unions, and the governments of the European unions. Wow, all the globalists. Of course, we know, which shouldn't surprise us when we see Bill Gates saying Elon Musk could make Twitter worse on misinformation. Oh yeah, really, huh? Bill Gates said Wednesday that it's unclear if his rival Elon Musk's 44 billion Twitter takeover will result in positive change, saying it actually could make the social media's apps problems worse when it comes to misinformation. Boy, we sure don't want people to think for themselves, do we? We don't want people to take this expert and this expert and decide for themselves which one might be telling the truth. No, you need to believe what we want to tell you is the truth. That is what is happening. What's going to happen with the false prophet? This guy is God. You worship him. There's no other God but the Antichrist. You worship him. And anybody that tries to say anything different will not be able to, because he controls the information. Now notice, but why? They need to control the information that you and I have access to. So it wouldn't surprise us as we read in the news, and this article is from the CBS News, about this disinformation governance board that they're forming. And of course, they make it sound like it's for something different. And like I said, once a government agency is formed, it's not going away. The Department of Homeland Security is setting up a disinformation governance board to try to counter the spread of false information. The board will focus on disinformation coming from Russia, as well as misleading messages about the U.S.-Mexico border, the Associated Press reports. The immediate focus will be on misinformation from human smugglers who spread false claims about U.S. border policy to migrants to help drum up business. You really think that's where that's what it's really all about? White House Press Secretary Jan Psaki said during a briefing Thursday that the board will tackle misinformation on a range of issues. The Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said part of its intention is to counter misinformation in Hispanic communities especially. See, they're covering up what they actually want to do by things that are just minor, that most people, even conservatives, say, oh, that's no problem, but not understanding they're trying to create something that has a much wider plan. In a statement to the U.S. CBS News, a DHS spokesperson said the department began its work on disinformation several years ago. They've been working on it a lot longer than that, folks. It says the department has created the Disinformation Governance Board to ensure this work does not infringe on the fundamental right of free speech, and to further protect privacy, civil rights, and so they're doing the exact opposite. Notice they're telling you they're doing one thing, but they're really doing the exact opposite. The spokesman said to provide this protection, the board will coordinate the department's internal activities related to disinformation that poses a threat to homeland security. Really, then it is the government that decides that. You and I, that are fundamental Bible-believing Christians, we have a target on our back. We are a line item on the Department of Homeland Security's watch list because we think that Jesus is coming again, just like the Romans did to Jesus when he said that he was king. Disinformation expert Nina Jankowicz, or however you pronounce her name, this lady is not good, who has researched Russian information tactics and online harassment, is author of the book, How to Lose the Information War, Russia, Fake News, and the Future of Conflict. She has also advised the Ukrainian government on strategic communications, according to the Wilson Center think tank, where she served as here it is, global fellow, globalist. This is all about globalism. She wants to be able to, if you have something, a differing opinion than what she has, that's fake news. If you have a differing opinion about something that you know is true, or you have a counter to what they say is true, they want to shut you up. They want to make it so that you don't have a platform, and they even want to make it illegal. In the state of California where I live, they're trying to make it illegal for a doctor to say anything that isn't told by the CDC. And they're trying to do that. And they're trying to create a disinformation law that if you were guilty of it, you could go to jail for just saying, I mean, it can't hold up against the Constitution, but that's where the world's going. We're working around the First Amendment. We have a First Amendment fallout happening here right now in the time in 2022 that we're living in. And now we know that this is possible because of the birth over the last 5 years of not only 5G and artificial intelligence, which is just a whole nother animal that we could chew on, but this is very interesting because this is how they're going to be able to take it into the next level. And this is President Biden signs memo to combat quantum computing threat. So the White House announced today that President Joe Biden has signed a national security memorandum aimed at maintaining U.S. leadership in quantum information sciences and to mitigate the risks of quantum computing to the nation's security. Promoting United States leadership in quantum computing while mitigating risks to vulnerable cryptographic systems, also known as NSM-10, directs the U.S. government agencies to migrate vulnerable cryptographic systems to quantum-resistant cryptography as part of a multi-year effort. So they're protecting our communications and information and data by this next step in quantum computing, which is they've just discovered that they can do. They've just made it possible to do quantum computing, which is a whole nother animal. But notice something very interesting. As the national manager for national security systems, the director of who? The NSA will oversee this process of the 50-plus government departments and agencies using national security systems that contain classified information or are otherwise critical to military and intelligence operations. A quantum computer of sufficient size and sophistication, also known as a crypto-analytically relevant quantum computer, will be capable of breaking much of the public key cryptography used in digital systems across the United States and the world. That means they can break into anything. Your phone, your computer, they have access to everything. Anything that's online will never be hidden by the NSA again. This is the NSA we're talking about. Remember the server farms before Edward Snowden came out? Most of us have a short memory, but us prophecy people were pointing out the server farms a long time ago when they were building them. And now with the quantum computing, can you imagine? But we also remember at the same time the internment camps and the shots long before Charlie Vector came around. There was shots being talked about, the camps were being talked about, and the server farms were being talked about over a decade ago. And guess what? They're still in play. Incremental. One step after another, one step after another. They are marching us toward the reign of the Antichrist, folks, and the influence of the false prophet. The system is already put in play, and there's nothing that will stop it. It will come about. The Bible makes it very clear. God's word will come to pass. He's been batting 1,000. He's not going to stop now. He is perfect in everything that he has to say, and everything that is foretold will come to pass. So for you and I, when we see these things, don't be surprised, don't be alarmed, don't be shocked like it's something new. No, this is something that's been in the works for a long time. Ever since the Tower of Babel, all the way through history, through Babylon, and into the one world government that's coming now. It's all a demonic, evil play by Satan to come to his day, which is coming, which will only be short. It'll only be for an hour, and it will come to crashing into judgment. But for right now, we know that the Bible says that we know that before he is revealed, there is something that is restraining, and we know that restrainer to be the work of the Holy Spirit in the church. And so for you and I, we're to pray against this evil. We're to see these things and we'll pray against them and restrain them. The one world government's only been able to do it incrementally because of the prayers of the saints and the restraining force of the Spirit working in the world today. But there's coming a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, when we will be caught away and that restraining force will be let go to let Satan run his course. which will only be for a short period of time, and Jesus will come again in the second coming, and he will set his foot on the Mount of Olives, and he will rule and reign for 1,000 years and take the Antichrist and the false prophet and cast them into the lake of fire. For you and I, that is good news, and we should be thankful for that. But you need to make sure that if you're not right with Jesus today, that you need to put your faith and trust in him today. Time is short. Time is running out. We don't have much time left. So you need to put your faith and trust in him today. If you have put your faith and trust in him, keep your eyes looking up because he's coming again soon. So with that said, we just want to say thank you for watching today. Please join us if you can on Sundays as we're going through the book of Revelation at Calvary Solid Ground. I'm cross-posting it on the Apologetics and Prophecy Facebook page. You're more than welcome to join us. You can go back and watch the archives of our studies and the archives of these prophecy updates on the website and the app for Calvary Solid Ground. With that said, I'm going to close like I always open with Maranatha.